Welcome back to the Tao of Wellbeing. So, I want to talk a bit about what happens when our usual way of doing things, which is often inherited from our culture, um, no longer works. So, very often we have this idea that really to be alive is to achieve, is to get stuff done, is to do more, to do more. There's so much kind of motivational, kind of coaching and quotes and how to 10x this and increase your productivity by whatever and achieve more and achieve your dreams and do and it's all great. It's all the world of yang. It's like the world of getting stuff done, but life doesn't always allow that. Okay. And this can be quite a revelation, um, because we can do it for as long as we can do it, and then we can't. Right. And there's this idea in Taoism that when yin or yang reaches its peak, it actually becomes its opposite. So if you're super yang and you're like achieve, push on through, achieve, to do, chances are you might actually then morph into extreme yin, as in have a breakdown or crash or burn out. And then the question becomes, okay, this is a whole new way of being that is required of me. And we don't often have a lot of preparation or training for that way of being. Now, in some ways, I was quite lucky. I had this experience. I was going full steam ahead, like absolutely crazy. The only thing I kind of remember about it is occasionally thinking to myself, how on earth am I doing this? Just crazy amounts of, particularly for me, it was like mental work, like computer programming and making courses and teaching and writing books. And it was during lockdown as well, so a lot of my social life was online, and then I'd relax watching Netflix, and I'd like study stuff when I wasn't, just never stopping. My poor brain. There's this phrase in Chinese medicine which is the brain eats the body. Now, I'm not particularly well informed about Chinese medicine, but I think the idea is that your brain is like taking the resources, like the energy, the chi, or more specifically, if you don't want to get into that whole kind of chi thing, just like the blood, is like going into your head and it's being used, and it's like your brain's overheating, and it's not necessarily flowing back down very easily because you're just like up here all the time, and it's like, and of course your body, your health suffers through that. So I found myself in a situation where I couldn't do it anymore, and not just like less, but like, sorry, body says no. There's a book called The Body Says No. I've listened to half of it, and it's okay, but it's not. Yeah, I've kind of got bored of it. But the basic idea is great. It's like, if you can't say no to life's demands, your body might well do it for you by getting really ill. Um, so what do you do then? So that you have to redefine the whole, have to redefine the meaning of life to a certain extent. Because if our identity up till now has been, well, I do this and I achieve that, and that gives me a sense of satisfaction, and so I do the next thing, and we're kind of living on this kind of treadmill where what we believe to be the meaning of our lives is getting stuff done and achieving stuff and succeeding in kind of external terms. Then if that's taken away from us for whatever reason, it often is health, I expect, for a lot of people. But maybe there's just some major life change, or like just some kind of realization, or the body for whatever reason is saying no, or is saying it's time to change. Then how do we deal with that? It's a really interesting one. So I was quite well prepared, because in the past, before hitting this kind of crazy stage, I'd had quite a lot of contact and interest and experience with various meditation traditions. So the kind of idea of human being versus human doing was not entirely um, new to me, and not just as a kind of abstract idea, but I'd actually spent quite a lot of time sitting and meditating, doing various retreats and having that as a part of my life, and that had gone really onto the back burner while I was on this treadmill. And to be fair, a lot of the reasons people are on these treadmills is because we live in this crazy economy where if you can, in order to meet your basic needs, you have to have the money. In order to have the money, the economy is not necessarily particularly generous to people who don't try hard. So we sometimes it's tied up with our survival needs, and that can be really difficult then to kind of break that, because it's often both are present. So like, yeah, there's the need to kind of hunt and to provide for our needs, but there's also this other thing which is more subtle and insidious, which is this constant need for more, this constant need for stimulation, this constant need for a sense of achievement. And the economic pressures that a lot of us face make it very hard to recognize when we're doing one or when we're doing the other. But the side of it, which is kind of compulsive, can be very, very destructive. And it can become like a kind of addiction. They have various metaphors, like in Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about hungry ghosts. So that can, I mean, it's a metaphor as well as considered a kind of reality as well. It's a kind of interesting worldview. But that idea that you're never going to be satisfied, enough is never going to be enough, enough is not sufficient. So you're always, you finish one project and it's like, you're straight away without even kind of resting and kind of enjoying that kind of sense of achievement. You're already planning the next mountain to climb. And that really can be a problem. And that then is no longer necessarily a kind of wise kind of, what's the word? I can't think of the word, but the kind of provisioning for yourself. It's beyond that. It becomes a compulsive need to do and a need to achieve. And anyway, life can say, sorry, I'm not doing this anymore. And then the question becomes, how do I redefine my existence with this new paradigm, which is the paradigm of like, I can basically do very, very little. And I can't, I was speaking personally, my experience, but I expect that other people have had a similar experience. I can't do like 90% of the stuff that I want to do. This was early on. I'm a little bit better now, but so a lot of the time I'm just going to have to just be in bed. And even being in bed, I'm not necessarily going to be doing all these like wonderful creative visualizations and meditations that I've learned, because I haven't even got the mental capacity to do it. So then one thing I found helpful there was this thing that I identified with my counselor. We called it horse practice, which is a type of endurance, right? It's pretty unpleasant if you've got a lot of unpleasant symptoms going on, which I did have, and I still do sometimes. But also a complete exhaustion beyond, we're not talking tiredness, we're talking, extreme fatigue, which is something, unless you've had it, it's quite hard to understand what it means. But yeah, not even having the mental capacity to do much. So in this kind of endurance state. And I watched a film called The Revenant, and I also thought of the second Star Wars movie where on the snow, Han Solo cuts open one of those animals and shoves Luke in it so that he can get through the night without dying through of hypothermia. And it's that kind of thing where it's actually, there's nothing doing here. All there is enduring, just surviving whatever my body is experiencing, whatever is going through my mind, whatever my emotions are. Just in a way, the word surrender, which has different connotations for different people, and sometimes it can be a very negative thing. It's like, walk all over me. It's not necessarily a positive thing, but also it can just be a kind of acceptance of what is, in which case it's a more positive thing, because you don't always have the means to make things other than what they are. And again, I think this is one of the illusions of our culture, is like we have this illusion of control, and a lot of people come from that fundamental assumption. It's like, I'm in control of life, and that illusion can perpetuate for quite a long time until something happens where it becomes evident that that's not the case. The Buddhist teaching of kind of impermanence, and also old age, sickness, and death. It's like we cannot avoid these things. I suppose maybe we can avoid sickness if we're very lucky, but we're going to get old and we're going to die, or we're going to die earlier than that. But one of these is going to get us sooner or later. However powerful we think we are, however much our will and our ego might be like, yes, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I'm going to make the world conform to my expectations. Not always going to happen. So sometimes we have to, it's like almost like being reborn with this new like hermit crab without a shell. It's like almost this very, very raw experience of like, okay, well, I'm still alive, but only just, it feels like. What's possible? What isn't possible? What can I expect from life under these new terms? And that can then become a whole journey, a very, very interesting journey. It can very, very painful at times. There's a whole lot of grieving for like the old way of being, the old level of health, the old capacities, the old just ways of being. Things that you took for granted. Like, I'm going to make a plan. I'm going to go and see my friend on Thursday, and it's going to be great. But you can't, because there's no way I know what my health is going to be like on Thursday. So, just fundamental things like the ability to plan ahead, and to follow through on plans, rather than maybe having an aspiration that you might attempt to do something and inshallah, God willing, it might happen. but it may not, and then not allowing yourself to be too upset by that because it's out of your control, you know. So there's this whole way of being, and I think it can be quite well symbolized by the hexagram of the I Ching, which is the yin, the receptive second hexagram. So no longer are we in this creative space where we're like our will is steaming ahead and making things conform to our hopes and expectations. We're simply responding. And for some people, maybe they've done this and it's not such a massive shift for them. And in a way, it might be worth, even if you're on that kind of on the up, you know, on the up and up, as they say, just being mindful of the fact that that can't go on forever, and maybe just, you know, a little bit of like preemptive learning and investigation of what it might be like to not be constantly pushing, um, because it could befool you that you no longer can. Um, so yeah, different ways of being, and then learning how to be with that, learning how to respond to what each day or what each moment really brings, um, in kind of real time. So it's like, okay, I need to go and lie down because my heart's pounding. I can barely lift my teacup. Time to lie down. You know, and another day it's like, well, I'll go for a walk, but I'd love to go for a long walk, but actually my body's telling me I need to turn back and I've only been walking for 5 minutes. But that's like responding in real time. So this is the receptive. It's like responding to what life is presenting rather than imposing myself upon that. And I suppose more spiritually, they talk in Taoism about the mind of man and the mind of the Tao. So the mind of man is like, you know, my little self, my little ego. Like I have this desire or this ambition, and I'm going to make the world, you know, try and fit in with that. Versus something else which is kind of flowing through me, which is kind of for the furtherance of all. Their concept in Taoism of compassion is everything furthers. So maybe there's a flow, and this is interesting because I had a conversation about going with a flow, and of course only dead fish go with a flow. There's a lot of reasonable objections to the idea of going with a flow, right? Because it can again mean walk all over me, let oppressors get away whatever they're getting away with. But it's not, you know, there's different levels, different like lenses or whatever of understanding these kind of these what can seem like platitudes, almost like go with the flow, or, you know, surrender or practice acceptance or all this kind of stuff. Different perspectives on it. So, you know, going with the flow doesn't mean necessarily like, you know, don't fight the battles that need fighting, but it's maybe surrendering to something higher than your small self. They talk in some traditions, you know, you've got your big self and your small self. So your small self wants this, but actually there is a bigger flow which you just kind of allow to almost manifest through you. And I guess this relates to the concept of Wu Wei in Taoism, which is like non-action. It doesn't mean do nothing, but it means it's not coming from your ego. It's just kind of the natural flow of the universe flowing through you. And in Buddhism, they might talk about like spontaneity, in Tibetan Buddhism, which I know more about than other types. You know, like just be ready to kind of spontaneously manifest the behavior that uh, this is an example of one of those things that I'm talking about, right? I've got this will to say something, but my mind's not playing ball, so go with it. Wisdom and compassion is what I want to say. You know, like what action is going to spontaneously manifest those qualities of wisdom and compassion. And, you know, the teaching is sometimes that can be all like chilled and mellow. Sometimes it might be a wrathful kind of whatever, but you're not planning it. It's allowing something greater than our small selves to kind of flow through us. And I think maybe this is kind of what I want to say in this video is like that, the yin, the receptive, being in service rather than leading, you know, following rather than leading. There's a time in life. There's a time and a place, right? A season to all things, as they say. And you may well be in a very yang phase, but that may not last forever. And you may need to be more yin. And then that is a whole learning, and it's got some wonderful silver linings. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not easy. It hasn't been easy for me at all. There's been a huge amount of suffering. I've had to have, you know, I've had to deal with a huge amount of grief and fear, all sorts of anger, you know, all sorts of emotions. Um, but it's quite rich as well, right? We're learning, or I'm learning this new way of being, which is to be in a more yin relationship to life. So I'm responding to life, as it, you know, kind of evolves before me, as it emerges. And that's very wonderful in many ways. It's very different. It's not what I'm used to. And I'm not completely abandoning the whole achievement thing. I mean, the very fact that I'm making this video is going to give me a sense of satisfaction. I'm hopefully contributing to, people's lives in some way. But I need to be really careful that I'm not like, okay, right now I'm going to make loads of videos and I'm going to get 10, however many subscribers, and I'm going to monetize it. And it's all going to be like, my new kind of crush it thing, because crushing it is probably what got me here in the first place. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have the absolute clarity on causal thing, but I do think that my crushing it beforehand is definitely a factor in what happened to me, although there may be other causes as well. So yeah, so then I just wanted to say something about the rule of thirds, okay, in this context, which is, in a way, we're talking about the principle of sustainability. So in Taoism, they have, it's sometimes translated as a 70% rule by my teacher, Bruce Francis, but that's a very specific number. It doesn't have to be exactly that. But the point is, when you're exerting yourself, if you stay within 70% of your capacity, then there's margins for error. You've got something left in reserve for emergencies. You're not going to burn out. You're not going to create resistance because you're pushing too hard. Like if someone's giving you a massage, it's like 100%. You're like, get off me, Whereas if it's too floppy, that's no good either. It's got to be like, firm, but not with force. And various traditions like Tenzin Rinpoche talks about, not using force at all in your practice. Whenever you notice effort or force, then, you need to recognize that and back off. So the rule of thirds is, 2/3 roughly, or 70%. Yeah, whatever. don't get hung up on the maths. Of your full effort when you're healthy and well and strong, right? So crushing it should look like 70% of what you're capable of. So you can work, I don't know, 8 hours in front of a computer every day. We'll do 2/3 of that. For sustainability. But then if you're compromised, you get down to 1/3. So if your health is suffering, and if I can walk for an hour maximum without like falling over, collapsing, and my heart pounding and nearly fainting or whatever, then I'm going to walk for 20 minutes maximum. And it might be as small as, I could walk for 10 minutes maximum. So I'm only going to walk for 3 or whatever. Yeah. So just staying radically within our capacity is completely opposite, really, to the kind of mindset of our culture, which is stretch, go beyond, go beyond, go beyond, go beyond. Yeah, push, 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 push. And that's great for a time, and sometimes you might need to do that in exceptional circumstances. But as a kind of ongoing proposition, it's possible, probable even, that sooner or later that's going to stop working for you, and then you're going to have to address some of these issues that I'm talking about, like the more yin way of living. Even if it's only temporarily, but it might well be that, moving forward, having had those extremes, maybe for myself, it's like, crazy crushing it mentality, like 10xing it. I read all the books about 10xing and, be obsessed or be average, all these kind of motivational books, which are great, but they don't mention this side of stuff, right? So this is like, I think it's an important adjunct to that teaching, right? So, doing the crazy crushing it stuff and then becoming totally incapacitated through the kind of physical breakdown that I've been through. Maybe there's then a way of moving forward that kind of honors the yin and the yang and is in balance, which may have been so much more wise to have embraced from the start. Although, who was it? Blake, I think, said the path of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. So maybe I wouldn't have known. But we can learn from others, can't we? Learn from their mistakes. I think that's it. So the yin side of life, not the inside, the yin side. Preparing for it, recognizing it, understanding it, and seeing it in kind of contradistinction to the yang side of life. Give it some thought, explore it. That's what I wanted to share with you. Thanks for watching. Actually, see you in the next video.